Welcome to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast, where you get help and guidance through the chaos of parenting a child with anxiety or OCD. This show is for educational purposes and is not intended to replace the guidance of a qualified professional. Here's your host, child therapist, Natasha Daniels.
Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about what do you do when your child can't explain their OCD. We talk so much on this podcast and in my AT parenting community about finding the core fear, finding the OCD theme, finding the thing that is the fuel line that's pumping this fire that we're calling OCD. And a lot of times parents don't know what to do if they're getting nothing from their child. And so I want to talk about there's still a lot that we can do even when your child can't explain their OCD. I'm going to talk about why that is, a lot of common reasons. And then after the break, we're going to talk about what to do about it. But before we jump in, I do want to thank NoCD for sponsoring this episode. NoCD offers affordable, effective, convenient therapy, and they're available in the US and outside the US. You can schedule your free 15-minute consultation to see if NoCD is a right fit for you and your child. Just go to treatmyocd.com. That's treatmyocd.com. I'll also leave a link in the show notes. Next week is my survival series, as you probably heard at the beginning of this episode. Don't miss that. It is a free series that I do twice a year. I've been doing it for quite a while now. People take it almost every time I do it, so you're definitely welcome to join it again. It's the same series, but we always do bonus live classes, and those classes are always different topics, different stories, different questions. You can join at atparentingsurvivalseries.com. I'll be giving you concrete tools on how to motivate your child, how to get them to talk, which is very relevant to this topic today, how to incentivize them, how to craft effective exposures, the do's and the don'ts of incentive plans, and why sometimes exposures don't work, the missing ingredients. And I will wrap it up by telling you the important elements that you need to have to create a therapeutic home environment. We can't fix our child's OCD. We can't stop compulsions for them. We are one piece of the puzzle, but what we can do is create an optimal environment where they can succeed in using all their skills. So our job is to create that therapeutic environment, and their job is to use the skills. And our part can go a long way. And that is what we're going to be talking about in this free series at atparentingsurvivalseries.com. It starts next week. Okay, let's jump into today's topic. What do you do if your child can't explain their OCD? Let's just talk about why that is. And so you might say to your child, Why do you have to always tap before you leave? I don't know. Why can't your dad sit on the left side of the couch? Why do you freak out when I touch your backpack? Or why do you leave towels all over the bathroom and you can't pick them up? And so we ask them these questions, and a lot of our kids can explain it, and they'll say, this is why. But a lot of them don't. And they'll say, I don't know, I just can't. Why is that? There are different reasons for different kids. So let's break this down first. One of the biggest ones is embarrassment and shame. OCD can be embarrassing. It can be embarrassing for a lot of reasons. Sometimes they are sexually taboo topics, and so they don't want to tell you that it's because they're worried about semen, right? That's a very common one, and it's one that tends to shut kids down. They don't want to tell you that they're having sexually intrusive thoughts about the dog or about their sibling. That's very uncomfortable, but common in OCD. And so there's also just embarrassment and shame about having these quote unquote silly, irrational thoughts. Because for a lot of people with OCD, there's insight. And that's kind of the curse of OCD on some level, is that you're aware that these intrusive thoughts don't make sense, but you feel compelled to still do the compulsion. And so there can be an embarrassment about having these nonsensical or irrational thoughts, or the need to do these things that are embarrassing. And you're already embarrassed that you have to do them. You don't want people to notice. You you feel a lot of shame around it. And then people are asking you why you're doing it, which makes you feel even more shame. And I'm not saying don't ask them. There are ways to ask them. And actually, we spent a whole section talking about effective tools in language, the words to use when you are trying to probe and explore your child's OCD theme. And so definitely join that free series because we spend a whole part of a video talking about that. And there's a handout around that. But it is important to know that sometimes how we ask is shutting down communication as well. All right, so that's one element. And these are not mutually exhaustive. So, I mean, they can have multiple ones. The next one is a big one. It's not a fear, it's a feeling. And so when we ask questions like, what are you worried will happen? Or what does OCD say will happen? Or what are you scared about? Or what bad thing is going to happen? And you're hitting a brick wall, it might be because they're giving you the answer. There are several themes that don't involve a fear. They're a feeling. The fear might be that the feeling will never go away, or the fear might be that they won't be able to handle the feeling, but they're not, most people aren't going to see it as a fear. There is a fear there. They're a fear to experience the feeling, or they're afraid the feeling will never go away. But the feeling is really what's driving it. And so some common themes around feelings are disgust. So disgust-based OCD could be like, it's just gross, or it's disgusting. And you'll hear kids say those words. And that to me is a clue that you might be at the bottom of the rabbit hole, that might be what's driving their OCD. And so they might say things like, germs are just gross, or sometimes disgust can be driven by dead things. I think something dead touched it. That's disgusting. It could be hair. It could be garbage. It could be bodily fluid like pee, poop, or semen. Disgust can be really anything. Boogers. It could be smells that just disgust them. I've had people who have disgust around feet. They're just gross. So when they're just saying, it's just gross, that's normally what kids will say. That's an indication that they can't explain their OCD because they're already explaining it to you. And this can drive kids crazy when you're like thinking you're not getting the answers and they're giving you the answers. Another one is just right OCD. And this is when things feel just off, right? So things are not just right. So things look not just right, or they sound not just right, or they look, did I already say look? Or they feel not just right. And it's different for each person as far as how this manifests. You can even have experiences need to feel just right. And so like my birthday needs to feel perfect and just right. So if you're in a bad mood, you're contaminating my experience and making it not just right. Or I can't watch this movie until my glasses feel just right, until my seat feels just right. Or I can't go to bed until all my stuffed animals look just right and my wrinkles are out of my bed just right, or I'm going to have a bad night's sleep. So sometimes there is this magical thinking attached to it, like it'll ruin the movie, and it just won't be a good feeling. So that's a common one. People are writing and rewriting their words until it looks just right, or they're making you repeat their sentences or your responses until it sounds just right. Or their clothes need to feel just right. So they're taking shirts and clothes off and on until it feels just right, or their hair needs to be balanced, or their laces need to be tightened and loosened until it feels just right. Now, sometimes just right OCD can overlap with sensory processing disorder. Sometimes it is sensory processing disorder and not just right OCD. Sometimes it's only just right OCD. And sometimes OCD has hijacked sensory processing disorder and made it a thing of its own. So that one can get a little bit confusing. And then symmetry, which often goes with just right, is the need to balance. And so things just have to feel balanced on both sides. I separate it out from just right because there's a balancing aspect to symmetry OCD. And I know a lot of times people call symmetry OCD and just right OCD the same. I see them as different. And so maybe if I touch things with my left hand, I have to touch it with my right. There's no fear attached. It just feels off. And if you really want to be very specific, the fear is that I won't be able to handle the feeling. I just won't, it just doesn't feel right. And so maybe if I hit my left leg, I have to hit my right leg. Or if I open the door with my left hand, I have to open it with my right hand. So this balancing out can be very overwhelming. And that sometimes is the entire OCD. It just has to feel balanced. So sometimes you are getting the explanation, but you're just not realizing it. So that's another category. The next one is a bit controversial, but sometimes, and there has been some research that has shown this, compulsions do come first. And I know that rocks the world, especially if you're doing ICBT, which is based on the fact that, and it starts with the intrusive feeling. Well, they don't really spend a lot of time on feeling, the intrusive fear. And then it is the story that you wrap around that intrusive thought that is the problem. Reason why I have a problem with ICBT, which is inference-based cognitive behavioral therapy, is that I have seen research that has shown that the compulsion does show up first. I've seen neuroscience research that shows that when you're talking about the biology of the brain, a lot of times you'll see it's the circuitry in the prefrontal cortex and the basal ganglia, and it's something physiological happening in the brain. The other reason on a personal level is I had specialized in very young children with OCD. That was kind of it wasn't on purpose, but I got this reputation of being able to take very young children. We're talking 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds into my practice who have OCD. And so I got a huge influx of kids who are very, very young with OCD. And they did compulsions, and there was no intrusive thought attached to it. The other interesting thing is in my kids support group for the AT parenting community, so my online member community, we do support group calls for the parents and one for the kids and one for the teens once a month. And then weekly we do live classes for the parents. But we just had one the other day, and a couple of kids were talking about their OCD and they were asking for help. And the other kids give the kids support, and I just moderate it and make sure that it's clinically sound. And I wanted to get clarification. And so a couple of kids were saying something, and I said, well, what does your OCD say will happen if you don't do that? Because that's kind of how I start to get to the core fear and the OCD theme. And they said, I don't know, nothing. I just feel like I have to do it. And I really feel like the younger you get, there's not always an intrusive thought around it. So yes, it's possible that their brain is compelling them to do something and there's no intrusive thought. So there is that. It's not common, and especially the older you get, the brain fills in the gaps. You are compelled to do something because you're having a brain glitch, and then your brain is like, I need to understand why I'm doing this, and so it will put meaning on top of it. That does happen. So there's that. Moving on from that, some kids just don't have the vocabulary or language or the expressive language skills to explain what's going on in their brain. And so they have no words to explain it. And in those cases, it's coming up with other creative ways to get them to talk about OCD. We'll talk about that after the break. And the final one, it's not an exhaustive list, but these are the most common ones, is they don't want to work on it. And they're shut down. They don't want to talk about it. And maybe they don't want to talk about it because it triggers their OCD. Sometimes OCD will threaten people. You know, I always try to personify OCD like it's like a mafia boss. But it will be like, hey, if you talk about me, I'm going to make this much worse for you. So it's like Fight Club, you know, what happens in OCD world stays in OCD world. We don't discuss. And so sometimes there is a true threat by OCD to not explain it, to not talk about it. If you talk about it, I'm going to make it worse for you. So it's literally a compulsion to be silent. Sometimes kids are afraid to work on it. And the more they talk about it, the more they feel like you're going to make them work on it. So they don't want to give you any clues about what's going on with their OCD because they're not wanting to work on it. They're not ready to work on it. And so they're going to shut it down. So those are a lot of different reasons. And I'll go over them really quick. So sometimes kids can't explain their OCD. Sometimes they can't explain it because it's embarrassment and shame. Sometimes it's a feeling, not a fear, like disgust, just right symmetry. Sometimes the compulsion comes first. Sometimes they have no language to explain it, and sometimes they're not ready to work on it. And sometimes it is an actual OCD compulsion to not explain it to you. All right, so that's that in a nutshell. After the break, we're going to talk about what do you do then? So you don't have any clue. You don't know what the core fear is. We talk a lot about crafting exposures that are very specific based on the core fear. And you don't know where to start because they're not willing to talk about it. Well, stay tuned. After the break, I'll give you a great place to start.
It's time we put help directly in our kids' hands. Introducing Crushing OCD course for kids and teens.
It was way more helpful than all the other therapy we've ever done because we didn't really know what to do. So we weren't really doing it before. So the course helped to figure out what the exposures are and how to do them.
We're not in therapy and find it really hard to find an ERP trained therapist here. So we're currently with like the public health service, but again, they don't seem to be trained in ERP. It's filled that gap that we don't have that was desperately needed.
This was really well timed for us to use between therapists and to help us get off to a good start with this new practice.
It was easy to use. I was able to do it from my phone or also on the computer.
There's different ages, so there were younger kids, there were teenagers, and so that was really nice too, to have a variety of ages where it wasn't just geared towards younger kids or older kids. It was a nice variety.
It's helpful for our kids to hear it from this third party as opposed to just us saying it.
I really like the offense and defense method. I love working on poking at OCD while it's sleeping. It makes it a little bit easier to do, and it's kind of fun. I'm planning on using it to work on my fear of holding or touching batteries and stuff like that.
So it was really helpful, and I think a lot of other kids would like it. I thought that I was the only one who had worrying about the weather and stuff. And then there was somebody else on there who worried about the same thing, which was really helpful.
Seems less scary to work on stuff now that I've watched this class, and I'm more interested to work on it.
I like trying to do more exposures still, and before I wasn't, I just didn't want to do them.
I've worked on some of my bigger compulsions and been successful.
I realized that it was helpful to do the exposures. Before it was really, really hard. It's still hard, but it's helpful to know that I need to do them.
Before there would be a lot of battles about it, so it is definitely less loggerheads.
Really, really good course and super helpful.
Definitely would recommend this. It's really easy to follow. It's nice bite-sized videos. I really like the worksheets that go along with it, and I think it's really helpful.
To learn more about this course and register your child or teen, go to atparentingsurvivalschool.com.
Welcome back. Okay, so if you don't have all the pieces of this mysterious puzzle, it doesn't mean that you can't start working on it. So the first step is to honor and respect when they're not wanting to talk about it. And I have been guilty of being a little too overzealous, where I'm just pushing because I just want the information. I feel like I can't move forward unless I know more about what's going on. That's not good. It's good to recognize when the foot is firmly on the brake. We don't want to ruin our trust and our communication with our kids by pushing too hard. So it's something you have to shelve and circle back with. And so reading those cues and honoring them, which can be hard when you're just getting going, or they give you a little bit, but then it shuts down. That's really frustrating. But we really want to build that trust, and so we don't want to push too hard in the moment. We might pause, we might have to circle back, we might have to leave it for a while and recognize if I'm always getting them screaming at me saying, I don't know, or I don't want to talk about it, or I've already told you, then we got to leave it. You got to work with what you have. And there are a lot of things that you can work with, even with not a complete puzzle of what is going on with OCD. The first one is to educate yourself. The more you know, the better you'll be able to spot themes and patterns in OCD. And I say this ad nauseum because parents, especially those that are kind of exhausted and checked out, they just want the short version of how to help their kids. Just tell me how to help if it's this. Tell me how to help if they have intrusive thoughts. Tell me how to help if they wash their hands too much. Tell me how to help if they're asking for reassurance. And I wish it was that easy. But when you just give little soundbite advice, you're missing the bigger picture. And OCD is complicated, and you do need to understand the full beast to tackle even a pinky of the beast. And it's not, you just have to find the best way to consume education. Some of you may be just listening to my podcast episodes and you're educating yourself. That's a great way. I have a course, How to Teach Kids to Crush OCD, and it's a foundational course for you. And even if your child's not willing or able to work on OCD, like part 1 through part 6 is just giving you as much skill as an OCD therapist. You will know all the OCD themes, the common compulsions that show up, how it morphs and shifts, what to do to not grow it, all that stuff. It's not until you get to part 7 of, I think it's an 8 or 9 part course, that you learn exposure response prevention and what to do with your child. And the reason for that, it's on purpose, because we have to have our own solid education on how OCD works in order to help our kids. The whole course is under 3 hours. So in less than 3 hours, in less than a very long movie, you would have all the knowledge that you need in order to spot OCD themes and patterns in your kids. You can check that out at natashadaniels.com/parent course. I wasn't sure. We create these like links so that they're easy for you when you're driving or doing the dishes or jogging. You can remember it, natashadaniels.com/parent course. Easy. But then I forget them. They link to the actual course, but we make them easy for you. So that's the first thing. You're not going to be able to see things if you don't know what you're looking for. So educate yourself. The next thing is, once you have that education, you might be able to identify at least the theme. And so if my child is doing a lot of questions and I look at the pattern and I say, these are all questions of being bad, right? Mom, I gossiped yesterday. Does that make me a bad person? Mom, if I curse in my head, is that a bad thing? Mom, if I looked at this, does that make me a bad person? Or Mom, 3 years ago, I stole some gum from your purse and I just want you to know. And you start to look at the pattern, you're like, the common denominator here is about being a good person or being a bad person. Well, now that I'm educated and I have consumed information that helps me understand OCD, I know that there's a theme called moral OCD, and it's about, the core fear is about being a bad person. So now I know. If my child is opening every door with their elbow and not being able to touch certain things and is overwashing their hands, well, I know I'm dealing with some sort of contamination. And so I at least know, okay, we're dealing with contamination OCD. I don't know what's driving it, but I know that that is a theme. Or if my child keeps doing things until it feels just right, I know that we're at least in that theme. So you can narrow down the themes if you understand them yourself. Without your child even telling you something, I can watch my child. Like with my daughter, she goes to the bathroom 20 million times. I know she has, we ruled out medical issues. At that time, I know she had sensory motor OCD. She's going to the bathroom like 50 times an hour. We ruled out any medical issue. Well, sensory motor OCD makes you hyperfixate on a bodily function. So now I know, okay, I'm probably looking at that theme, which I was. Or my child's always asking if they're about to throw up and they're always nauseous and they're always worried. Well, okay, I know I'm probably dealing with the emetophobia, the fear of throw up. So you can start to understand the theme at least, which can help. So the first step I have parents do, and I have them do this even if we have a lot of information about OCD or we're just starting out, I'll say, make a list of compulsions. If your child's not willing or able to participate in this, you can do it yourself. You're going to see the tip of the iceberg, so you're not seeing the full iceberg. But maybe I observe them going to the bathroom 24/7, or maybe they're taking 5-hour showers, or maybe I see them washing their hands in the sink multiple times, or maybe I notice that they're asking me reassurance questions 20 billion times a day. So either they make the list, or you make the list, or you make it together. In the most perfect of worlds, you make it together. I'm going to make this list of compulsions. These are all the things that you're doing because OCD is bossing you around and telling you to do. Or these are all the things you're avoiding because avoidance can be a compulsion. Or there's mental compulsions. This is a part you can't do as a parent. They have to do. So you have to educate yourself on mental compulsions, because if you're not aware of what that is, you're not going to be able to teach them or educate them so that they know they're doing it, because most kids who are doing mental compulsions don't know they're doing it. So that's an element as well. So make that list. And then I have parents make a list of accommodations they're doing for OCD. So what is your part in enabling OCD? Most of us do something. Not every parent. There are, especially if you have an older child with OCD, it might be all mental compulsions. You might not be involved in their OCD at all. But more often than not, we are doing things to enable OCD, to survive. And it's not one of those things that you can pull back right away. But are you answering those reassurance questions? Are you giving them reassurance when they do their confession compulsions to you? Are you wiping things down or doing OCD's rules, not sitting here or not touching that or going in this direction, or a million other things that OCD can have you do? Are you washing clothes and towels every single day, supplying an endless amount of toilet paper and soap? These are the things that we do that enable OCD. It doesn't mean that you're a bad parent or that you need to stop them right away. It's just a roadmap of, this is what I'm doing to complete the OCD loop, and this is what my child is doing. And so now we have a list. And you can start working just with that list without knowing the core fear or even the theme. You can start working on that list. And so you can teach your child how to do defense around compulsions. And so I talk a lot about offense and defense. And offense, well, we'll talk about offense in a second. Defense is, I'm defending myself against OCD, right? So OCD is coming in, it's knocking, it's bothering me as the child. And how do I respond to that? And so I teach this in my OCD course, and I actually have a course for kids too. If you want to give them the tools directly, that's very powerful. We have a link for that too, natashadaniels.com/kids course. But teaching them what do I do when OCD wants me to go wash my hands? Or what do I do when OCD wants me to ask you this compulsive reassurance question? And in both courses, I go over, and the kids course is different than the parent course because I'm talking directly to kids. I'm teaching them the skills directly. And I have 12 other kids and teens helping me teach the course. They talk about their own stories, how they use these tools. So it's very powerful. But we want to, and this podcast episode isn't about teaching you how to do this. It's just teaching you what steps to take next. But we want to teach them to delay listening to OCD, to eventually ignore the compulsion, to eventually do the opposite of what OCD wants, and then to move into offense, which we'll talk about in a second. So they can definitely do defense around compulsions, even if you don't know the core fear or anything about OCD. You can teach them the fundamentals of, hey, OCD is bossy, and it's going to want you to do or avoid things. And the more you do or avoid those things, the bigger OCD grows. So on a very basic fundamental level, when you make OCD wait, when you delay doing what OCD wants you to do, you can't delay avoidance, but you can delay action. So it can't work for everything, but it can work for a big chunk of things. So when you delay it, that is getting your power back. That is shrinking OCD. When you eventually move into ignoring, and sometimes delaying can move into ignoring, that's super powerful. And it doesn't mean you do it every single time. Every time OCD is telling our kids to do something, that's an invitation to do something back. It's an invitation to say, how do I want to respond? And they might have 100 situations like this per day. And they might be able to resist OCD in some and not in others. And that's just the way it goes. But teaching them that basic element is really helpful. Now, if they don't want to do that and they're not ready to work on that, then you can still work on your list. And so you have your list of accommodations, and you might slowly pick one and say, from now on, I'm not going to do this particular accommodation for your OCD. Now, there is a whole system in how you do this. And if you want to get deep into understanding how do you systematically do that, there is a SPACE approach. Ellie Leibowitz's SPACE program talks about systematically pulling back accommodations for OCD. And I do have a SPACE study guide that walks you through it. So I have a course for everything. You can check them all out at atparentingsurvivalschool.com. But the SPACE program is basically systematically pulling back that involvement. You can get his book, Breaking Free of Child Anxiety and OCD. I think it's called Breaking Free of Child Anxiety and OCD. I don't know if I just said that. I looked it up because I always feel like I put a from instead of an of, but that's Ellie Leibovitz. Some parents like a course, where they can see videos and worksheets and they can work their way through it. And I do have that in my online school. So that's another thing that you can deep dive on is, okay, I can't, they don't want to work on it right now. They're not able to work on it right now. And so I can at least pull back my accommodations. I don't know why OCD is making them do this. I don't know the core fear. I don't know the theme, but I do know what I'm doing that is growing the OCD. And I can learn how to pull back my involvement. So that's something. If you have a child who's willing and able to work on things, but they just don't know why they're doing things or they can't articulate it, then you can, one, show them videos. I have a whole YouTube channel and thousands of videos that are for kids. And I actually just pivoted recently and I'm making videos for parents. So if you like this podcast, you can check out the videos too, because they are different topics than what I do here. But showing them videos on how to crush OCD and how to understand their themes, that helps educate them. And that is an exposure in itself because you're working on OCD. It's doing the work. Sometimes just watching an OCD video is an exposure because it's so triggering. So that could be helpful. If they're willing to do offense, so defense is responding to OCD, offense is ERP. ERP is exposure response prevention. It is a type of cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's the go-to therapy modality for OCD. There are other ones. There's ACT, acceptance commitment therapy, but ERP is the first line. Then ACT is a great supportive therapy, and ACT plus ERP is really helpful. Not a fan of ICBT. I've already mentioned that. But you can do offense, which is purposely triggering using ERP. You purposely trigger the intrusive thought or feeling, and then you don't do the compulsion. And so you can't do very sophisticated exposures because you don't know the core fear. And I talk a lot in my AT parenting community about how to craft really effective exposures by honing in on the core fear. And I actually have a whole workshop in my online school about just how to find the core fear, because that is very powerful. When you know how to ask the right questions and you find it, you can craft much more effective exposures by tackling the core fear that's driving multiple OCD themes and the gazillion compulsions. You're getting to the head of the monster, but you don't need to know the head of the monster to do some basic ERP. So if I know they have a hard time touching a doorknob, then maybe as an exposure, we're going to purposely touch the doorknob and not wash our hands. I don't know what it is about the doorknob. If I knew the doorknob had boogers on it, then I might do a lot of great exposures around boogers. And that's really getting to the core fear. But if I know the doorknob's a problem, I don't know why, we can still do exposures where they touch the doorknob or they touch a tissue that touched the doorknob. So you can still do some basic offense, ERP, around the theme or around the compulsion. You're just not going to be able to fine tune it the way that I teach parents in the AT parenting community and in my courses. So still, you can see a lot that you can do without knowing much about OCD. And a lot that you can do even if your child's foot is on the brake and they don't want to work on it at all. Now, in my free series, we're going to talk about what to do when your child's foot is on the brake. And I break down all the other things that you can do in your environment to help your child, even if they're not able to work on it themselves. The beginning of the series opens up on the series website with a quiz to see, is your child's foot on the brake? So you can see that. And how much knowledge do you have? So there's two quizzes. The first quiz is, where are you at? Are you really skilled and knowledgeable about OCD in general? Do you just know about your child's OCD, or do you not have enough information about OCD at all? So you can take that quiz and see what your results will be. And then I have a quiz on, where is your child at? And so I will tell you, based on the quiz and the questions, whether it seems like your child's foot is firmly on the brake or whether it's on the gas, and what you do with that as well. So join us for the free series at atparentingsurvivalseries.com. I look forward to seeing you over there. I hope that you're finding my podcast helpful. If you are, don't forget to hit a star and rate it, or leave a comment on Spotify. I am checking them now. If you leave a comment under an episode and I see it, I will read it. I only look for the last like 4 or 5 episodes. So if you leave a comment on an old episode, I won't see it, but other people will. So I do appreciate it. If you are listening to this on a platform like Apple, I will get your comment and I will read it out loud to show my gratitude on my next episode. So I hope that you find the sparkle in everything you do, and I'll talk to you again next Tuesday. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. To get additional support raising a child with anxiety or OCD, visit Natasha's online school of on-demand classes at atparentingsurvivalschool.com.